there were others that thought differently, but so here this hypothesis. So when we're thinking about the theory of inquiry, and one of the steps is you're supposed to compare your hypothesis with other hypotheses that you believe. Is it coherent? Does it fit with it, right? And this was a severe problem because the hypothesis, the understanding, the model was that everything orbits a center. And now all of a sudden to have things orbiting something that's out there. Wow, that's kind of impressive, right? I highly recommend reading, if you get a chance, I think it's Heilbrunn. I must have misspelled it. There it is. I misspelled his name. But if you get the chance, I highly recommend this interesting book. It gives a lot about his childhood, his father. His father was a guitarist or musician that played a guitar and was part of an argument over how you tune a guitar. Kind of musical steps should there be in the musical notation and so on, and how do you tune a guitar in order to play music. I mean that's if you compare the Western tradition, which is really only since Bach, although built on Pythagoras, the divided line theory, you end up with the harmonics, the harmonies that are based on the divided line, and how we structure the way sound works and so on. You compare that to something older musically, like sitar music, raga music in India, where they have 12 tones in between the Western pitches. So you get, that's not too bad for someone that doesn't have any talent. I did that pretty good. Ravi Shankar, and then the Beatles came, and all hell broke loose. Oh well, so Galileo, fascinating book, and part of what really intrigued me was his relationship with Pope Urban, because they were actually friends, knew one another, and Urban, the Pope, clearly comes out as the more intelligent of the two in this treatment of Galileo and his relationship with the Pope. And Galileo was adamant that yes, this model, he didn't call it that. This, is solar, a solar centered system, and that's true. Pope Urban, on the other hand, says, well, it's just a model. And this model is the model everybody believes, so if you go out there and you say, this model is true and this one is false, you're just going to cause all kinds of problems, which actually happened, right? Because he ended up getting published, even though at the beginning of the book, he apologizes for the publication of the book, explaining that he had nothing to do with the publication of the book. It was his friends that did it. So in the book is his explanation of why he's not the one that should be found guilty for publishing this book of his ideas. It's just hilarious. I think it's hilarious. And of course, because of the press, it got spread all over the place. And so, of course, you have this. So something I want to talk about next, actually, and it's sorry how fast things are going, is Thomas Kuhn structure. So what we have is a historian of science is Thomas Kuhn is not a scientist, he's a historian of science. And this book became a bestseller and absolutely shocked him and everybody else, because who the heck is interested in a history of science? But this book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and notice there's the Copernican Revolution, there's a separate book, and so on. But what he does in this particular book is he argues that the progress we see in science typically is viewed as kind of a progress because we're getting closer and closer and closer. You have to say things like that in threes. To the truth, right? We're getting closer to the truth. Knowledge is progressing, right? What his study shows is that this kind of paradigm shift, which is where that expression comes from, I believe, this book, is a result not just of people learning new information, but from social characteristics, the characteristics of people in groups. And so it's actually a revolution in the same way that we talk about, well, it's not as bloody as the French Revolution or the American Revolution, which wasn't really a revolution because the same kind of authorities just gave themselves more freedom from King George, right? But the kind of social structure didn't change in our society. But when you look at scientific revolutions, and some of the examples, of course, are Galileo, but you also talk about people like Einstein and more modern things. The old guard of scientists basically have a lock on what everybody believes, and they don't allow newcomers in, and they won't deal with problems that are outside the scope of what they've already solved, essentially. And so it's very frustrating to young men, and women too, if they're in that boat, which mostly they weren't, right? Who want to deal with problems that aren't already solved, but who are also not in line for power positions in that social structure, because it's usually based on your relationship to the people that are there. The father will promote his son, or the father will pardon his son. Oops, sorry about that. Which I understand. I saw the sequence. Trump is going to offer a position in charge of justice to a guy who wants to totally destroy everything and thinks the Justice Department should destroy Biden. And so Biden is essentially, oh crap, well, I'm going to give him a pardon then for 10 years, etc. I read it, understand it. I see how things changed, right? But so what happens, Kuhn explains, is that you literally end up with one social group, young people that have been kept out of positions of authority in the old guard are the ones that fight to get into that group, and the old guard gets kicked out, and the new ideas become the new paradigm. In other words, social or scientific progress certainly does indicate hypotheses that work as solutions to problems. The problems usually not being the problems that were worked with by the previous group, right? But also it means new blood, new people getting into positions of authority, and a real social revolution in that sense, in solving the problems. So you get to see that science essentially is a people. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that we're humans. Scientists are no different than being humans and being interested in social power. Who's the boss? Whose theory wins, right? You know, and so you got multiple theories out there, but whose theory is it that essentially rules the roost, if you want that's another rooster reference. And he's got lots of different examples of paradigm shifts. Galileo. Yes, Galileo Galilei is his full name. Introduced his new ideas, and you really needed a whole bunch of new people to come in and be on that side in order for that to work. And I don't think the church actually approved of him until like 1950. Was it?
No.
Yeah, it's 1950. And yet, you know, the church has an astronomy.
Well, they had that before they approved Galileo.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
that.
they've been interested in science. Phase one. So scientific change. Phase one. It exists only once and is the pre-paradigm phase of any particular theory, etc. But the old schools of thought disappear. The new paradigm leads to a more rigid definition of the research field. Normal science begins, in which puzzles are solved within the context of the dominant paradigm, etc. Phase three, if the paradigm proves chronically unable to account for anomalies, the community enters a crisis period, etc. Phase four, or paradigm shift, or scientific revolution, is the phase in which the underlying assumptions of the field are re-examined and a new paradigm is established. And then you have the post-revolution, where things go back to normal, but now with the new paradigm as dominant, etc. So in other words, it's not just a clear case of improvement in our understanding of science. Instead, what we have is conflict between different models, and the different models really are useful in different ways. We don't really need to give up the old models if they're still useful. You know, keep those things, you know. You can still use grandmom's treatments for health issues if they work, right? Now, why give those up? You know, maybe she didn't believe in bacteria. Maybe it was demons. I mean, really, you know, that's actually worked for people. And so on. I have to quit, because theoretically it's 11:15. Any questions for me?
When's our final?
Good question. Let me go. What's the best way to go here?
This Saturday.
Saturday? No. Oh wait.
Usually do on Saturdays.
When is it due?
Yeah.
Yes. Email me by the dates that I have on the syllabus. But
I didn't see any dates on the syllabus, so I'm just going off pattern.
let me. We do have a final meeting here.
Is the final meeting Thursday or next week?
No, Thursday is a regular class.
Oh, all right.
Um,
It's the one after that.
But yeah, because the final week begins next week, and I'm pretty sure I did the syllabus correctly based on what the, you know, online you can look up when you're supposed to be here, and obviously it's the same. It'll be Zoom, and I don't have anything physical that people need to bring, but so December 10th, so it's Tuesday next week. Now, you don't have to come. I have to come. You know, the way the the contract works is I have to be present for the class time.
What will we, be doing December 10th? Will you go? Or-
I'll basically the same as usual class. I'll, make up stuff on the spur of the moment.
But we're meeting here?
Yes, we have this room from 10 a.m. until 12